Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this talk desk and WellTel seminar in relation to what the contact center is going to look like post COVID-19 and lockdown. I'd like to introduce Michael Gray from Pitch Marketing Communications and Jane Gupta, Senior Product Manager, Marketing Manager with TalkDesk. Through the introductions now, some of the key findings from the survey, the contact center industry in 2021, and then we'll close out with a question and answer session. So if I can hand over to Michael Gray to go through the key findings of the survey.
Yeah, thanks very much, Damien. I'm just going to go on, just going to stop my video. So that's okay. And right. Fabulous. And thank you very much, Damien. And thank you very much for inviting me along to speak to you today. I hope everybody can hear me okay. So these are clearly very unique, very uncertain times. And none of us really know what the future of the contact center industry is definitely going to look like. But certainly we all have opinions, and everyone has an opinion. But the purpose of the survey was to really get opinions from a large number of people. In fact, we collected the opinions of over 100 people. It was 102 contact center managers in the UK, and sorry, contact center leaders, because directors, heads of departments, to not only provide some answers to some of the questions that everybody's asking, but also by sheer weight of numbers to provide some statistical significance to that as well. So we've got a lot to cover. There's quite a few slides, but I'm going to go through them in detail and hopefully not bamboozle you with too many numbers. But suffice to say that it was a major questionnaire that we tried to undertake. There were 25 questions. It took people an average of about 8 minutes to complete the survey. And it covered 3 key areas that we felt were the most important: what happened pre-COVID, what happened during lockdown, and what people think is going to happen in the future. Now, people filling in the questionnaire came from contact centers of all different sizes and all different industry sectors. And obviously, it goes without saying, a massive thank you to everybody who filled in the survey. I don't know if that was anybody on this particular webinar, but massive thank you, and you will be, by virtue of being on this webinar, be receiving a copy of the ebook of the more detailed findings from the survey afterwards. So let me just start with talking about the situation pre-COVID. We didn't really go into a great deal of detail. Suffice to say, we asked people how well prepared they were prior to COVID striking us. And the answer came back really that pretty well prepared. People were prepared for a crisis. They had business continuity plans in place. Over 80% of people had a formal plan. Over 15% had an informal plan, but people were generally well prepared. What were they prepared for, those, is the next question we asked. And what came out quite strongly is that there were certain things that people prepared in detail for, like shutting down offices. Communication with employees came out as something that over 90% of people had taken into account in their plans. There were other things, like it was spoken a lot about whether people were going to be replaced by artificial intelligence, or what this meant in terms of employment contracts. Those were typically not really covered within those business continuity plans. And other aspects like employee home working and how people were going to use technology to get them through the crisis. Over 2/3 of people responded that yes, they were part of our plans, but actually, as we'll go into in more detail later, not in a lot of detail in some cases. People didn't really have detailed employee home working plans, or indeed much experience of what they were just about to get into. So what I want to move on to now is what happened during the COVID crisis. And I'm going to start with the area that is perhaps the most obvious, which is home working. 77% of contact centres had 50% or more of their employees working from home during the COVID crisis. That's the majority of people working from home. How many had just 25% or less of their workers? It was literally just an eighth of those contact centres that we surveyed. So it's a huge, huge change from the norm, and it's created a massive number of challenges, as everybody is obviously aware of. So we wanted to drill into those challenges, and we wanted to ask what type of challenges, and we adopted quite a traditional approach. We looked at those in terms of people challenges, in terms of operational challenges, and in terms of technology challenges. And we looked at a number of specific areas within those. So let me just start with people. We said, how significant were the people issues you faced in your work from home contact centre? And we looked at employee engagement and motivation. We looked at anxiety and mental health, communications and absenteeism. And what I've done all the way through these slides is actually just ringed the ones that I want to focus on. Otherwise, I'm just going to throw a lot of numbers up in front of you. So the biggest people issue was anxiety and mental health, which probably is not going to come as a massive surprise, but 66% of people said that that had been a significant or a very significant issue. And something else I should have added is these three slides here I'm just going to put up, they relate to people who were predominantly working from home during the crisis. So moving on to operational challenges, and training came out as the most significant issue. 51% of people said that it was a significant or a very significant challenge during lockdown. We also asked, and there's some interesting figures there for health and safety, for productivity and for adherence as well. But training, especially training of remote workers virtually, came out as the biggest challenge during lockdown. And when it came to technology, managing contact volumes was the biggest problem. 44% of people said it was significant or a very significant challenge. And as we go on to look at later, the whole aspect of managing those channels as well came out as a significant issue. So, as I say, we're going to send the ebook out later. There's a lot of stats in that ebook. If you want to go into more detail in those areas that we just talked about, I would suggest having a detailed look through that later. But two more questions we asked about people's plans during lockdown. And firstly, we asked what they'd invested in to help them through the crisis. And it will probably come as no surprise that employee communications, especially platforms like Zoom and Microsoft Teams, video conferencing, audio conferencing, et cetera, came out top by quite some way. 80% of people almost said that they had invested in those platforms during lockdown. Smaller numbers, but equally significant. Over a third of contact centres said they'd invested in contact handling technologies. Almost 30% in cloud, and a smaller number, but equally significant, 25% said they'd invested in digital and online tools. So, our last slide talking about the current crisis, but what lessons have people learned that can be used in future strategies and implementations? And again, we return to this point about home working. It was such a major change to the norm during lockdown that 62% of people say we need to understand how to do that better if there was a subsequent issue with coronavirus or another crisis, indeed some other crisis. We need to understand how to do home working better. And a very large number as well, over half, said we need to use technology more effectively to manage customer queries. And Damien, I don't know if that's something you want to come in at this point.
Yeah, certainly. They were the two standout and still are the two standout issues. especially we deal with a lot of regulated industries, and in certain quarters, it's very challenging to have people work from home in those industries. But even across the board, the ability to use the existing technologies and put that out to people's homes, both in terms of the contact center infrastructure and the underlying infrastructure around broadband, PCs, VPNs, it became a major challenge for many organizations. And if we look, in a lot of cases, we've come up with a sticking plaster, but we genuinely believe, and you'll probably hit this later, Michael, that the days of purely operating in the contact center environment from an office location are probably forever gone now at this stage, and those technologies will have to be able to be expanded out beyond the four walls of the enterprise.
Yeah, absolutely, and maybe I should also have talked about the kind of pinky, sort of peachy coloured bar there, which says that we need to be able to give people more flexible work schedules. That clearly comes as a result of the move to home working, but equally it's something that technology needs to enable. And so it's not just about communications, it's not just about reaching people and delivering contacts to them, it's about using technology intelligently to provide more flexibility and agile, and to be agile as a business. It leads us very nicely on to really talk about what's the most interesting part of the survey, really. As I say, where we went to over 100 contact center professionals, contact center leaders, and we said, these are very uncertain times, but have a look into your crystal ball and tell us what you think is going to happen next year and indeed beyond. Will people, for example, easily transition back to their bricks and mortar centres? What things, and we've covered some people, operational, technology challenges so far, but which of those do you think might be more of a challenge, less of a challenge? Which ones may go away? And what investments are you likely to make next year and moving forward? So a good place to start that discussion is the question we asked about, again, work at home. In 2021, what percentage of your staff do you think will be working from home? And the clear response from this is that 35% of contact center leaders think that their centers next year will be mainly working from home, i.e. over 50% of their people will mainly be working from home. Only 27% think that a quarter or less of their employees will be working from home. And really that's incredible when you consider that just 12 months ago, and I'd go back to a piece of research that I remember that Steve Morrell at Contact Babel did, and I think the figure came out at 26%. 26% of contact centers had somebody, it could be everybody, but more likely to be just a very, very small team, or one person indeed, working from home. We're now moving to a situation between 2019, when that research was done, to the possibility next year that 35% will mainly be working from home. And it begs the question, is that something that people are going to have to do, or is it going to be optional? So we asked the question, and very, very few contact centres said that next year they were planning on making home working compulsory. It's obviously something that appeals to some people, it doesn't appeal to others, and it works for some people and not for others. But I think what's clear from looking at that bar that says 58%, the majority of people think that it's going to be something that they have to do. They prefer not to make it compulsory, but it's not going to be completely optional. It's going to be part of the landscape next year that people are going to have to be, they're going to have to adapt to home working. And obviously that's a major change, and it's going to throw up again more challenges. I saw a report just today that said that, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, which was talking about people having worked for 4 months at home now starting to realise that it's not as easy as they thought. And I think speak to any company that has been doing it for a number of years, and that's a normal phenomenon. And I think looking forward and talking about the management challenges next year, it's not going to be unusual for people to come across challenges next year that they haven't literally come across in terms of home working this year. It's a theme that we explored when we asked, do you think the challenges that you're going to experience next year will be greater or less than this year? And we started off by asking the same set of questions around employee engagement, around anxiety and mental health, communications and absenteeism. And again, we're just going to highlight the biggest issue, which again is likely to be anxiety and mental health. Over nearly a third, over 30%, nearly a third of contact centre leaders think that anxiety and mental health will be more of a problem next year than it was during lockdown. And that's given what everybody's been through, that is quite an astonishing finding. Again, with regard operational issues, and again looking at the same areas, the figure there we've highlighted is that 30% of contact centre leaders think that training is going to be a bigger issue next year than it is this year. And again, I think that goes back to, people looking at work from home as a short-term measure versus people looking at it as a long-term measure. And I think increasingly companies are responding to surveys saying they've now gone through the work from home experiment, and a lot of them now see it as very much a long-term strategy for them. Moving on to technology, and again, the numbers here are not quite as stark. Maybe it's partly because people have made large investments this year, but over 20% see managing multiple channels as a bigger problem next year, this year. And I've seen a number of debates about whether moving forward and adopting work from home, what might come with it is actually having to rationalize their channel strategies and cut certain channels. But certainly the whole aspect of managing multiple channels is identified as a bigger issue next year. So absolutely major changes ahead, and the focus very much on adapting and being agile in an ever-changing environment. So not surprisingly that those themes came out when we asked people about whether their business continuity strategies and plans are set or whether they need to be adaptable. 83% said they need to be adaptable, we need to revise them, and a very large percent who don't know probably make that figure even more significant. So we asked the question, what would you do differently if there was a subsequent wave or a subsequent wave of coronavirus, or indeed a subsequent crisis of any form? And having been through this experience, people very much said, and not surprisingly, we need to be better prepared. But I'm not going to focus on that particular number. I think what's more interesting is the two biggest responses to that were in terms of people saying that we need to deploy our work from home model faster. If we'd have asked the question, they probably would have said we need to refine and optimize our work from home model, but we never asked that question. But the other aspect is using technology more intelligently to bring about business change by using technology infrastructure and systems and making those changes faster. And again, going back to this flexibility, agility discussion, to where the blue bar is, being able to make and implement changes quicker. Again, stressing that this need to make changes on the fly and be very adaptable. One aspect is very much around, what people are going to invest in next year. And so we asked this question, looking ahead, what are you likely to invest in the next 12 months? And not surprising, well, perhaps surprisingly, actually, given that so many people invested in employee communications this year, I think it was 80% invested in platforms like Zoom and like Microsoft Teams. It still came out next year as the key area that people are likely to make investments in. Over 40% investing in communications, and also over 40% investing in remote management and monitoring systems, predominantly to get a better management fix on what's happening in the home working environment. And equally, it's notable that what's appearing here for the first time is an investment in AI. And I think we can extend that to self-service as well. But almost 40% of companies are saying that they need to invest in AI and self-service next year. And I think that's very much a point of planning for the future. Not only did we ask what people thought that the major changes, the challenges, the investments were, we also asked people what they thought the physical working environment may look like. And we wanted to know whether people thought that they were going to go back to a normal contact center when the crisis is over, whether they were planning to, as a measure, replace people with automation, or actually just break down the walls of the contact center and turn the contact center into part of the modern office workspace. And in each case, the answer really was no. The two outstanding findings were that 35% of people thought that the work from home environment would be the main working environment. And interestingly, that's exactly the same number that came up in a previous question when we asked whether people would mainly be working from home. So that's not a great surprise, but certainly backs up that earlier finding. But 57% of people said, no, we need to move back to the office, but in a socially distanced way. And of course, being in a socially distanced centre means you can't move everybody back in the same way. There'll be staggered rotas, there'll be social distancing, which really reinforces the fact that work from home is going to be part of the picture in the future. And then the final question. We asked people whether, in the light of COVID, do you think the UK contact centre industry has changed forever? And the outstanding response here was yes, we do. And even more outstanding if you take into account that 7.5% of people said they weren't sure. But I don't think there's any ambiguity there that all the things we've discussed earlier, that the challenges, the investments, the priorities, all of these in many, many people's eyes are potentially here to stay for some time. And the emphasis, I think, on this chart that's worth bringing out is we didn't ask whether the contact center industry has changed next year. We actually asked, has it changed forever? And I think that's pretty significant. Damien, again, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, so absolutely. I'd be in that cohort of nearly 90% that think it's changed forever. And I think what I'm seeing across my customers is a resurgence on the contact center as being effectively the gateway into the organization. And what I mean by that is where you would typically have seen bricks and mortar operations that are no longer available, or actually customers are shying away from. The contact center now becomes the gateway into those organizations, and there's more investment in the people, in the technologies, and how they operate in that contact center environment, and that, again, that focus on that contact center and customer care being effectively a high priority a strategic investment at board level. So that's the change I believe we're going to see. And as you said, the flexibility, and they probably coexist instead of shoehorn everybody into one building, spread out the desks and give people that flexibility to work from home. The other point I would make in regard to that, organizations who don't do that are going to lose their staff to organizations that will give that flexibility.
Thank you very much, Damien, and indeed thank you everybody for listening. I hope in some way you found that useful, and of course I hope you find the ebook useful. It's going to be sent to you over the next couple of days. Obviously, I'm going to say again a big thank you to everybody who filled in the survey, because we couldn't have done it without their support. And I'd now like to hand over to Jay, who will give us a perspective from TalkDesk. And just a reminder as well that there's a Q&A button at I think it's at the bottom of your page, it's at the top of my page, at the bottom of your page. And if you have any questions you'd like to ask myself or Jay about the survey, or indeed anything we've covered, please use that button. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Michael. Okay, I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Brilliant. Okay. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be speaking with you all. In my presentation, I'll be going through a plan that is currently guiding some CX leaders through the complex process of reframing operational strategies that will help contact centers be better and stronger leading into 2021. Now, the easing of lockdown varies across the world, and in the UK and Ireland, most shops, restaurants and showrooms have opened in accordance to government guidelines. And guidelines is the operative word here. It's what provides businesses a direction for an action plan for what to do next, and certainly what to do right now. And with that in mind, the TalkDesk strategy team created guidelines which we called the CX Reframe. And this is a set of 5 recommended points for organizations to take in order to reshape contact center strategies and have better ways to absorb large-scale disruption. Now, in many ways, the CX Reframe is a systematic thinking process. The first 3 points have guided contact centers through the rapid enforcement of lockdown. We saw many contact centers dramatically changing their operations whilst maintaining relationships with their end customers, knowing that close engagement and responsiveness is critical for business continuity. And I'll briefly mention the first 3 points to provide some context for points 4 and 5, which focus on post-lockdown operations and where we are right now in the UK and in Ireland. So firstly, point 1 is resolve, and this was about focusing on the safety and well-being of employees and customers. And that very quickly moved to the second point, which is resilience. And this was about being flexible and having sustainable measures in place during the lockdown. And then transitioning to the third point, which is return, and how to prepare for the stage that we're in right now in the UK and in Ireland as lockdown measures ease, and moving away from a war room style to a more agile and durable way of working, knowing that even though contact volumes have reduced, there are still high levels of complexity in managing customer contact. And this guide now takes us to the final 2 points, which involve more change-oriented research and evaluation to help contact centers decide on what investments will make a positive difference to operations and improve business performance. So point 4 is reimagine. And this stage requires us to stretch our minds and imagine contact centers operating in a world where there is a vaccine that is globally available and accessible, but thinking about how we can rapidly exploit technologies that are available to us now and use as an opportunity to modernize and simplify complex operations within contact centers. But to do this, we must devote time and research to understand new government guidelines, the state of the economy, customer behaviors, and technological changes, and also examine trends across industries. And then we should connect the dots and figure out how all of these factors impact contact center operations, and through the process uncover new capabilities to implement on a more permanent basis. So for example, adding components like virtual agents may be seen as a nice to have capability now, but further into a post-lockdown environment, this is likely to shift to an essential capability for business continuity, given that virtual agents can quickly scale with large contact volumes. And at TalkDesk, we believe artificial intelligence provides little value unless it's baked into features that makes contact centers more efficient and augments customer experience, with the goal to create an environment where human agents can coexist with virtual agents to solve complex cases faster. So, for example, our Agent Assist solution provides agents with an intelligent conversational guide that proactively delivers real-time suggestions on the next best actions to take. Also, investing in omni-channel capabilities should be high up the implementation agenda over the coming year. During the lockdown, we saw many businesses that have omni-channel capabilities supported by a unified CX system were better prepared to deal with the unexpected disruptions and continued to engage with customers across many channels. And what is core to all of this is retaining context in every conversation and personalizing them, even if the interaction begins in one channel and ends in another. And it's worth mentioning that some of these measures will help to boost staff morale as they feel more empowered to deliver a higher degree of service excellence. And the fifth point is reform. And this requires making bold steps and taking action now. It's about anticipating what lies ahead in 2021 and welcoming the next generation of contact center technologies. Lockdown has caused many digital transformation projects to move off course and forcing organizations to operate outside of set plans, processes, comfort zones, and really doing whatever it takes to keep contact center operations going. But this is not a sustainable situation for any business that's coming out of lockdown. Functionally and emotionally, all contact center stakeholders, from agents, supervisors to CX leaders, need clarity, structure, efficiency, and the capacity to manage large-scale disruptive changes whenever they happen. I think a key learning for all of us from COVID-19 is that we just don't know what disruption is around the corner. So it is important that CX leaders evaluate the existing technologies, infrastructure, and services underpinning current operations, and based on that, be bold enough to present the case to make important IT investments that can rapidly be deployed and will efficiently provide continuous access to high quality and feature-rich solutions that offer a more adaptable contact center environment. And at this point, let us all reflect a bit on our own lockdown experiences and how many of the cloud-based services we used have kept me and many of us on this call operational and connected during the lockdown. And with that in mind, let's imagine how contact centers can truly capture many of the benefits of cloud-based technologies. And I think if there's one thing that the contact center industry should do in 2021, that is to be fully operational in the cloud and also consider the shift to an as-a-service operating model to really see this as an easy path to achieve greater flexibility in how contact centers can not only very quickly adapt to large-scale disruption, but also uplift customer experience to something that is modern and delightful for customers, for agents, IT staff, and all key stakeholders. And with that thought in mind, I'll just wrap up with these last two slides about TalkDesk and how we're helping companies be successful at delivering great customer experience in rapidly changing environments. As a cloud-native contact center provider, our mission is to end bad customer service, and we won't stop until we get there. We're driving some much-needed disruption within the contact center industry. And already in this year, we have introduced 20 new products in the first 20 weeks of 2020. And many of these products were actually built and rolled out during lockdown by our developers, product managers, and teams across the world, who are working from home to do this. And if you are interested to understand more about our position in the contact center world, I recommend reading the current Gartner CCAS Magic Quadrant report. And here's a snapshot of some of our customers. These are companies from all sizes, and from all industries who use TalkDesk to power their contact centers safely and reliably and help make customer experience their competitive advantage. And with that, I'd like to thank you. And Michael, back to you.
Yes, thank you very much, JF. That was really interesting. We have 10 minutes. And if anybody would like to ask any questions, please use the Q&A button. We have already received a couple prior to, so to kick things off, I'd like to, Damien, you're online?
Yeah, Michael, yes.
Good. Let me start. Can I just ask a question that somebody sent in prior to the webinar starting, which is talking about work from home and talking about the cloud. They asked the question, is moving to the cloud or moving to the cloud actually a prerequisite for home working? Do you need to be in the cloud to home work effectively?
The short answer is no, Michael, not to do home working effectively, but to run an effective contact center in the future. Absolutely, the answer is without a shadow of a doubt. And the reason I say that is Jay suggested, look, they're a native provider, in a native cloud service provider. And we look after a lot of very large enterprises and small enterprises who have looked to go to cloud. And when we've looked at traditional vendors that like we are tier one partners with, their move to cloud has effectively been taking the box that was in the IT room and bringing that to cloud. And with new applications such as AI and bots, speech recognition, intelligence, that customer journey mapping is absolutely becoming a critical one. That is a mammoth task to do with legacy platforms, regardless if they live in the cloud or on-prem. The reason I effectively went to Gartner and probably about a year ago to say, look, we need a native cloud solution to bring to Ireland. Who is the best? What is up there in the right-hand quadrant of Gartner? And TalkDesk stood out for us. And I would equate it to the Nokia versus the iPhone, and not just the way you use that device, but the applications, availability of applications on that device, that you can pick and choose what applications I want to use on my device in my environment. And that's exactly where native cloud service providers live, as opposed to the old world where we've had to come from, where you've got coded systems. Every project is bespoke. Not only is it very expensive to do, but the delay and the speed to market is absolutely killing businesses. And COVID-19 just accelerated that. And unfortunately for large enterprises, that shift takes some time. But if you have a native cloud service provider like Salesforce.com, TalkDesk is, switch it on, decide what applications you want to use, test them out, and move forward. And that's really the benefit we found with TalkDesk.
Thanks, Damien. Can I just ask us a supplementary question to that as well, and just in relation to what has happened during this particular crisis, because it's most certainly affected everybody, and it's most certainly affected the way that contact centers operate. Do you think it's impacted when people call or when people make contact for service? Do you think the current crisis has impacted people's expectations of what they expect of service and of channel choice? And do you think that is going to be more of an issue next year?
They were somewhat forgiving at the beginning of it, Michael. in terms of look, the expectation of having some delay in relation to getting service, but that's going to quickly diminish. The change from a customer's perspective is they're a lot more likely to look to engage both digitally and through the contact center than actually walk through the door. And the ability for organizations to effectively augment the services, so flip between those digital channels and the analog human interaction is going to be vital. And again, for the last 18 months, that's probably been our biggest challenge, is moving that true omni-channel journey. And it is extremely difficult. It is very expensive to do in a legacy world, and a legacy world, whether it's in cloud or on-prem, are the same. So you really have to be looking at, look, what's the second generation of cloud service providers to deliver that. And that's what accelerated our journey to look out and move to TalkDesk as a partner.
Yeah, absolutely. It's I guess it's a challenge that traditional contact center vendors have not had to face, because it's always been, you know, a very much a bricks and mortar world. But moving to the cloud and all the things we talked about earlier, about being adaptable, about being agile, I guess that TalkDesk model and you know, the cloud model in general is very much better suited to.
Yeah, so that's not just a technology one, Michael. So you'll find that legacy providers, their operation model is based on really an on-prem or a license-based model, you know, a hardware model. It's around a massive part of their practice or their revenue stream comes from professional services. So, you know, you being able to switch something on tomorrow is not a good conversation for them to have, because it's killing, you know, effectively 30 to 40% of their revenue stream. So that's their challenge, and we were getting swallowed up in that, and we said, look, this is not going to be sustainable. We need to be looking at the second generation of cloud. And I think in Ireland we probably jumped over into that fairly successfully, insofar as in first generation there was very few cloud service providers in the Irish marketplace because of connectivity, and now we've actually jumped completely over that into generation. So if somebody's buying a new contact center tomorrow, I can absolutely assure you it will not be an on-premise solution, and I suggest it wouldn't be a first generation solution either if they look under the hood.
Great. Jay, if I could ask you a question now, that
Sure.
would, again, it's a question that we were posed just before this webinar started, but and actually we covered quite a lot within it to some degree. We asked people whether they thought their contact center next year would physically look like a situation where we had software agents and self-service replacing people, and the answer came back no. But we equally had a finding where 40% of companies said they were going to be investing in AI and self-service next year. So do you see any evidence of that accelerating next year, and because of lockdown, this move from live agent to self-service?
Yeah, so I mean, in general, the usage of virtual agents and chatbots is increasing across all industries. And, you know, we know that millennials, for example, they report back, you know, very positive experience of using chatbots. But, you know, moving further up the chain, you know, AI-enabled virtual agents, you know, they can reduce live agent workloads. You know, they're able to provide some very practical sort of solutions to address the more frequent questions that organizations get, but also, of course, they operate 24/7 as well. So that's really useful for an organization to have coverage during, you know, out of normal working hours, and also sort of the ability to transfer the more complex queries to live agents. I mean, one of the things that we recognized during the lockdown was that voice calls were still kind of a preferred channel for many customers, especially, you know, when customers are feeling anxious and vulnerable. so voice channels are important, but of course we want to make sure that we don't overwhelm human agents. And so I think the sort of the AI based and virtual agents definitely have a place to kind of sort of work alongside human agents. And I think the best contact centers will be those that where we're sort of successfully we see human agents coexist with virtual agents.
Yeah, absolutely. I think time and time again that comes out as the reality that technology is there to support live agents, not to replace, or certainly not for a number of years to come. But thank you very much for that, and thank you to Damien. And at that point, we've run out of time. So could I thank everybody for taking part in today's webinar. Thank you everybody again for filling in our questionnaire and making it hopefully if you agree, a successful exercise. Certainly it's produced some very thought-provoking numbers, and we'd be delighted to send you the ebook post this webinar. So from me, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.